Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
Yeah,
and before,
you are.
Yeah, sure I am.
I think. You might not be. I've never,
background
tried to verify
me.
that. Right.
Yeah. Dumb idea on your part.
You do know an awful lot about serial killers.
It's all
and
part of my
pirates.
15-year plan of knowing you and eventually sabotaging you. Yeah.
My name was actually Brad Matlock, you stupid son of a bitch. Ha ha.
It's Dan Matlock, idiot, and everything else about my life is the same.
Same, right.
That would be a funny thing to lie about. I want to catfish people, but just change one small detail.
Right. And that would be the one thing, you meet some woman and you started as a gag, but you actually hit it off and finally you're like, I have to admit something.
I have to tell the truth. When we met, I told you I was a Chargers fan. I'm an Eagles fan, you idiot. How could you not pick up on that?
And she's like, that's the one thing that made me love you, was the Chargers. Yeah. I'm out of here, you asshole.
It's pretty sad, actually.
Yeah.
That's how few Chargers fans there are.
I've noticed that it seems like the nicer the city, the less people care about sports for some reason, as if they have other things to do.
I don't know. LA's not that. It's not that nice.
Well, that's true. It's just, there probably are a bunch of Chargers fans, just none of them can make it to the fucking stadium.
Well, there's a bunch of
Chargers
fans.
Games.
They're all left. They all got left behind in San Diego in the great purge.
Purge, yeah, that too.
But anyway,
welcome to our sports talk show.
Yeah, the real sports talk live every
week.
We'd
be great at it because I don't know shit about sports unless it's like a local team, and even then, I'm pretty iffy.
To be fair, we don't know anything about what we talk about on this show.
That's true.
Which
Good
is
point,
anything. And sometimes it's funny, and if it's not funny, or you think we're annoying when we try to be funny, just wait until we try to be smart. Yeah, so Non-Essential Podcast. Every week it's a different story. They can be real or fiction. And Steve, it's your turn.
Yeah, I probably should get started. This one might be long, but...
Oh, hang on. Let me find a topic.
Yeah, let's see. Google, what is interesting?
What is NFT? I'm feeling lucky.
Robert Philip Hanssen, or as I like to call him, the Big Bobbert, was born in Illinois or something in 1944.
Bobbert Bowie.
Young Big Bobbert's life was relatively uninteresting. That is, until he joined the FBI in 1976. He was transferred to the Gary, Indiana headquarters, or field office, or whatever the fuck they call it, and tasked with finding out why the hell that Music Man song always gets stuck in my fucking head. Gary, Indiana, Gary. I don't know. You're probably too young for that.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, was born in 1950 or whatever that.
1932.
Yeah.
When You Are My Sunshine was the greatest hit.
What do you mean was? It's still... Oh. 2 years later, Big Bobbert Robert was moved to the New York field office. And I'm sorry, if you think that stupid Bobbert nickname I came up with is annoying, you're going to fucking be
just wait until
the end of the show. I used it. I literally used it for this whole thing, and my notes are like 2 pages longer than normal.
It's a pretty amazing nickname because every time you say it, my brain switches off. And I just get lost in the sounds of that name, and I have to reconnect. I've been interrupted in your story 3 times now, and we're only 3 minutes into it.
That's a good consistency. I like it. A year after that, he was assigned to counterintelligence and tasked with creating a database of Soviet intelligence. I assume his coworkers quickly grew tired of him saying, "In Russia, intelligence database is you."
That's awful joke.
When fellow FBI agents quit even pretending to find that funny, Big Bobbert grew angry with his coworkers, with the FBI, and hell, with the whole damn country, and decided to turn that anger into wads and wads of cash. So Robert the Bobbert Hanssen approached the Soviet Main Intelligence Directorate, known as the GRU for some reason.
The GRU.
Yeah, it's like Soviet SMID, otherwise known as GRU. I assume it's because they speak a different language than us. Anyway, he approached them and offered his services as a spy. The money was nice, but even better, Hanssen soon found that in Russia, they were willing to laugh at his stupid American joking.
I bet the Soviet Union would have paid me to just, like... Because everybody was so fucking hyper paranoid back then. I could have just described shit going down at, like, a fucking Jack in the Box. And
I was just about to say, like, hey,
yeah, and I'm a spy.
I hear McDonald's is about to bring out a 6-piece nugget to insert between the 4 and the 8-piece.
And I don't tell anyone I told you, but Carol, the manager there, is thinking about splitting up with her boyfriend.
What do you mean you're not sure how that's helpful to you guys? You use it. I'm just the messenger.
Do you want to know the fucking hierarchy of the people in power in the United States or not?
So for the next 3 years, Big Bobbert supplied the Soviets with information on U.S. bugging and surveillance activities, which is whatever, but also with the names of U.S. double agents working against the Soviets, which, considering what happens to double agents when they get caught, is pretty damn shitty, Bobbert. I'm disappointed in you. Perhaps most notably, Bobbert betrayed Soviet General Dmitry Polyakov, who had been working as a double agent for the U.S. for years while he worked his way up through the ranks, which he apparently did pretty good because he was a general. Fortunately for General Polyakov, the Soviets did not act on this tip from secret agent Robert Bobbert. Unfortunately for Polyakov, in 1886, they did act on the second tip supplied from a second mole within the U.S. intelligence community.
Bobbity Bobbert.
Bobbity Bobbert. I'm a totally different person. Pay me a different salary.
Master spy puts on like a fake mustache and be like, yeah, I'm just confirming what he said.
The best part is Bobbert has a mustache, so it would be a second mustache. Like,
that's a mustache for the mustache.
I'm picturing not even like over top of it, like above or below the first mustache. That's clearly a different guy. This guy's got 2 mustaches. So, based on the second informant's informing, Dmitry was executed, which really sucked for Dmitry.
To be fair, like the first time someone snitches on you and you dodge the bullet, you got to get the fuck out of there. Like,
yeah, that's kind of tricky though when you're a general. It's like, yeah, I just remembered I left the oven in America on. I'll be right back. Don't shoot me.
One fucking helicopter ride, you knock out the pilot, and you fucking go. What kind of spy are you?
If it's anything like over here, if you're a general, you just walk up to the helicopter, say, I'm borrowing this, and they can't. Who's going to tell you no?
That's not the military. That's Grand Theft Auto.
Well, you're the general. You own it.
But if you just say, like, hey, I want to fly in one of these because it looks fun, you could probably get away with that.
Yeah. But please turn off the radar for a bit for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. So, Dmitry's execution was really, really bad for Dmitry, but actually pretty great for Big Bobbert, which I'll discuss shortly.
Because they named him King.
In 1981, Robert Hanssen was transferred to the Washington, D.C. office and given a job in the budget office, which sounds boring, but actually gave him even more access to information pertaining to surveillance operations. However, the job must have kept him busy enough that he no longer had time to run his side hustle because the Bobbert took a break from spying for like 4 years.
Like the fucking BTK? What the hell?
Yeah.
You don't take time off from that shit.
So, it would be a pretty boring episode, but in 1985, with Nintendo on the verge of releasing their seminal system in the United States, and under pressure from his 6 fucking kids, because he couldn't keep it in his pants, to buy the Mario games, Secret Agent Bobbert, Big, found himself in need of some supplemental income. So by this time, Hanssen had been transferred to the FBI's Soviet Analytical Unit, which put him in charge of identifying Soviet spies and then evaluating them to see which ones seemed likely to turn into double agents. And he was back in New York. So that's a pretty great job if you're a mole. Is being like picking the spies to send over there and then say, hey, this guy's a spy, Russia. How do I know? Because I appointed him. As you can imagine, this was like being a cokehead and being put in charge of Pablo Escobar's cocaine warehouse, and also being given the job of catching anyone who steals from the stash.
Why would you use that example? The one thing I got caught doing.
Okay.
And
I know.
Bring
I had
it
to
up
make
on
it
the show.
personal.
What the fuck?
It's a weekly thing. You should know by now that I'm going to bring it up. I'm just disappointed that you got caught, Ben.
Well, I'm disappointed that I ran out. So,
so anyway, that was a really dumb analogy as a way to say that there's nothing better for a spy than being in charge of catching spies and cocaine. Yeah. The Big Bobbert wrote an anonymous letter to the KGB seeking payment for his services.
how do you pay it if you're anonymous?
I mentioned that. This kind of confused me, too. Like, why would you write an anonymous letter when you've been spying for years? But apparently, when you're spying for the GRU in Russia, they don't communicate with the KGB because those are separate agencies. So this was him branching out. He's like, I'm going to go above their heads and go to the KGB. I think what it actually is was the KGB was kind of newly formed. There's a lot of turmoil in the Soviet Union.
I'm just imagining a lot of fuckers sitting around this letter like, okay, where the fuck do we pay it?
Well, it gets better because he sent this anonymous letter saying that
shit.
He sent this letter to the KGB saying, hey, I'd like to spy for you. In this letter, he gave up the names of 3 U.S. spies, Boris Yuzin,
Oh, fuck, dude. Why are you
Valery
blowing up my
Martyanov,
spot?
and Sergei Bodorin. And he also requested $100,000 in cash money, son. So
That's not a lot of money. What year was this?
Well, this was 1985. Now,
like, you're gonna be killed if you get caught. Like,
yeah, and you're right. It's not a lot of money, and this won't change that fact. Except, it noted that in today's money, that would be worth $205,000, and it kind of blows my mind that in the last 25 years, 100,000 has more than doubled in value because inflation is that fucking out of control. Yet we keep acting like, not we, but our government keeps acting like, no, things are normal.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's all going to crypto anyway. Let's burn these dollars to the ground.
So maybe I'm an idiot, and we have 163 other episodes of the show that would attest to that. But it seems like a really bad plan to give the information to the KGB first, and then ask for money.
Maybe it's why
and then
I'm
sign
broke,
it.
But to me, it's anything that puts my life on the line, I at least want $500,000.
Yeah, I've talked about that with these people that rob banks, and they're like, "Oh, he got away with $1,500." It's like, I get it.
That's a lot of money to blow at the bar once.
But robbing a bank sends you to federal prison for a long time, and $1,500 isn't worth risking going to prison for a long time. And that's a lot of times I read these banks that get knocked over for hundreds of dollars, not even $1,000. And it's
It's all digital now.
Well, that's the problem. How do you?
Not how many banks actually have that much money lying around? You have one occasional withdrawal when you have to buy, illegal guns or whatever people get up to, so you have to get cash again. But most of the time, it's just numbers. That you're
taking enough cash out that the teller winks at you like, this is totally legit.
Oh, getting a car, yeah.
So, like I said, it may be me being stupid, but giving up your information and then asking for money and then signing the letter anonymously seems like a really bad way to get paid.
Yeah.
Additionally, and unbeknownst to Hanssen, the 3 agents which he had exposed in this letter had already been exposed by the same mole who had exposed Dmitri the second time.
Piece of shit.
And that mole was out of the CIA. He's with the FBI, so I like to think that these two spies were rivals.
Fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, and they hated each other. And he was like, "You fucking CIA mole, you beat me again. That was my money." So for what it's worth, the Matryanov and Motrin were executed by the Soviets, but Yuzin was only sentenced to 6 years, and it had something to do. He was a diplomat, so political immunity something came into play.
Diplomatic immunity, yeah.
So I'm sure he spent those 6 years in a very nice Soviet prison because they're known for being cushy.
To be fair, why would you, like, that's kind of on you if you trust a diplomat. Like, they exist to, like, not be your friend. Like,
right. So upon that guy's release, he defected to the U.S., which was probably smart.
Yeah, good call.
Like I said, I like to think that the CIA mole, whose name was Aldrich Ames, and the Big Bobbert were just like, they hated each other. They were rivals, and it's kind of like the when you watch the TV shows or movies where the FBI and the CIA agents show up to the same crime, and they're like bickering about who trumps who or whose jurisdiction it is or whatever. Yeah. Except with this, it's like spy stuff.
Except in movies, it's always like, hey, this is our case, but like. Most of the time, every documentary I've ever seen that's like that, the FBI just wants to get out of there.
Oh yeah, they don't want to be
like nobody wants to do shit at the FBI except like yell at you for stealing movies or some dumb shit.
That's the thing. They're like, you fucking local cops can't solve this 30-year-long like serial killer spree, and we have to come fucking help you. I could be in Ohio arresting a 13-year-old for downloading torrents.
Looks like you need us slick city folk to come in and save your ass to say that we can't solve it either after 1 week.
So it's not known, or at least not known to me, whether the KGB mailed the $100,000 in cash to a Mr. Anonymous at 123 Fake Street in Cityville State. But they did resume working with the Bobbert. Aldrich Ames of the Central Intelligence Agency, otherwise known as the CIA.
Ohio State University.
That's exactly why I did that, yeah. And he worked for the CIA and totally not a spy for anywhere else, including but not limited to the Soviet Union, which sounds like a mouthful and me being stupid, but that was what was actually on his business cards. And that's kind of what like clued in his superiors that like, hey, wait, maybe he is a spy. But Aldrich Ames would end up getting caught. So while he beat the Bobbert to the punch like twice, he got caught first too.
Yeah, well, technically he's the only one who exposed anybody.
That's true.
The Bobbert wanted to, but he was slow.
Exactly, and that's where I'm going with my next thought here. That's why that General Dmitry Polyakov's execution not happening until after the second informant turned him in was so great for the Bobbert, because when Ames got investigated and they traced that guy back to him, they kind of quit investigating, where if they had continued down the path, they would have realized, hey, wait, this was leaked first. But, you know, when somebody leaks an informant and then you catch them, you think, we got the guy. When the investigation of Ames uncovered that betrayal, the investigation stopped there, blah, blah, blah. So I just doubled my thought. Double the money.
Yeah, double the content. Mm-hmm. We just repeat everything we say.
We just repeat everything we say.
That's a double episode for you guys.
Double episode for you guys.
You're going to piss me off.
So that was also more or less, kind of more or less than more, but the same case for the other three informants. You know, they both exposed them, but when the first guy got caught, you know, they thought they had their perpetrator. Except this time the FBI was pretty certain that there maybe possibly was a chance that someone in their own organization might have also leaked the information.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So the FBI is starting to figure out something may be going on in 1987. So the Bobbert who was awesome at his job on the FBI stuff, was put in charge of finding the mole that leaked the information on Motorin, Matrianov, and Yuzin. Using all the investigative skills he learned over the last decade, the Bobbert quickly identified the mole as himself. However, he failed to tell anybody else of that finding. He did, however, turn over the entire study, which was full of all sorts of juicy inter-office gossip about who might be spying for who, to the Russians. So he didn't compile this list and well, these guys could be spies. He compiled this list and it's I'm going to sell this to Russia because I'm the spy. That's kind of what caught my attention on the story in the first place, is that this guy ends up being put in charge of an entire FBI investigation to catch himself, unbeknownst to the FBI. So in 1988, a little office snitch tattled on the Bobbert after he had disclosed some very extremely confidential information during an interview with a Soviet defector. So again, like, part of his job when these people came over, either they caught them spying or they defected from the country, was to, like, interview them and see if they may be, like, good spies for the U.S. So basically, like, during one of these interviews or interrogations or whatever you want to call it, he mentioned some stuff that he really wasn't supposed to, and one of his coworkers overheard and was like, hey, no. Yeah. He went straight to the Bobbert's supervisors, but because nobody likes a snot-nosed tattletale, and also thanks to his stellar record as an FBI agent, who is definitely not a spy, the Big Bobbert's superiors decided... Yeah, they're like, fuck it. No, they didn't do anything. They're like, nah, that's fine.
That's a very American approach to really any problem.
They're like, yeah, he probably should be fired, but that's a lot of paperwork, and then we have to hire somebody.
It's not even rationalizing laziness like that. It's just like, that could be work. Quick, deny it. Just deny it until we can't anymore.
It's like, sir, I've got some information. It's like, go ahead. With the Bobbert, he did this thing. It's like, and leave a message after the beep. Beep.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I'm busy. Get out.
A year later, the Big Bobbert compromised an investigation into Soviet spy Felix Bloch by giving the Soviets a helpful heads up, and they quickly ceased all communications with Bloch. So basically, Bobbert learned that the United States was like onto this guy, and so he contacted Russia. It's like, hey, he's going to get caught, and they were able to just quit talking to him, and the U.S. was unable to get enough concrete evidence due to that to charge Bloch as a spy, though they did terminate him and withhold his pension, which is probably all they really cared about, because most of what goes on is more about money than anything else.
Most of the people he probably tried to give up, they were going to kill anyway.
That's the thing, is like, I talk about how bad it is to be like spying against Russia and get caught, but it's no better to be spying against the United States and get caught.
Well, because they both lead to the same result. You get killed by Russians. That's
well, America kills you too.
No, we set it up so that, like, you're fucked with, like, and then Russia thinks you're the enemy.
Mm-hmm. On two separate occasions, the Bobbert gave the Soviets two complete lists of American double agents, which was kind of mind-blowing to me that somebody out there just had an entire, like, spreadsheet. And they're like, yeah, here's everybody we got working for us secretly, and here's their addresses and phone numbers, and here's where their kids go to school and what classes they're taking. Like,
this is their order at Subway.
You would think our highest intelligence agency would, try not to maintain a singular list of double agents, but
I do not think that highly of them.
Probably shouldn't.
Like, none of this, like, this is interesting, but none of this shit is surprising to me.
No, yeah, that's exactly where I was with this. Oh, and I should probably point out, if you listen to the show on a weekly basis, 2 weeks ago when it was my turn and I had to give up and do a creepypasta because I didn't have time, I mentioned coming across a really awesome topic that I couldn't wait to do. This is not it. I started to do that, and then I found this. I'm like, this sounds easier. So I did this.
A master of hype.
Oh, I am, because what that means is my next turn will be an awesome story.
We get there, and it'll be like, I had to do a creepypasta. Turns out that was boring.
I couldn't find a creepypasta, so I'm just going to read out of this instruction manual for my microwave.
That could be interesting. Yeah, find the fine print about putting your balls in a microwave.
Don't do it for more than 30 seconds at a time. Ooh, that's surprising. So in 1990, Hanssen's goody two-shoes brother-in-law, Mark Walk, who also worked for the FBI, but didn't even have a boss nickname like the Big Bobbert, even though Agent Walk's name, like, just fucking lends itself to Agent Waka Waka or the Foz, gave the FBI a heads up that they might want to investigate the Bobbert. This came after Mark's wife, who was Mrs. Big Bobbert's sister, told Mark that she had discovered a huge pile of suspicious cash monies on the Big Bobbert's nightstand. And I didn't think about it till after the fact, but then I started thinking, it's like, What's she doing snooping around on his nightstands?
Well, she smelled suspicious cash monies.
Yeah, that's true. You can smell it from a mile away. So again, Robert Hanssen's superiors are getting a tip from a credible FBI agent that hey, something's not right here. And again, they decided, let's not investigate. They were too busy trying to track down the mysterious mole known only as secret agent, definitely not Robert the Bobbert Hanssen. So in their defense, the secret agent's nickname really threw him off the fucking trail. The Bobbert took another break from the spy gig when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 because they theorize, he's never flat out said this, but they figure that during that turmoil, it was just too risky. He was afraid of getting caught, so he quit spying. But once things settled down, a whole 12 months later, he decided to resume his super well thought out spy plans. And so Master Spy Bobbert went in person to the GRU, who he hadn't worked with in over 8 years. He went to the Russian embassy and met with a contact in the parking garage because that's how spies do it in the movies. At this point, he's been spying for over a decade, and he's yeah, let's meet in a parking garage at the exact embassy where the Russians are at. It just blows my mind because you could meet anybody anywhere and it'd be not suspicious, but you pick the one fucking place that it's super fucking suspicious to meet with somebody.
I don't know. It's just a couple dudes hanging out.
Hanging out in the parking garage
looking at cars that you can't buy.
Look, dude, we're learning how to skateboard, and there's no better place than the Russian embassy parking lot. And they're yeah, it's true.
Just talk nonchalantly about which cars you would blow up.
When he gave his code name, Deep Bobbert, the contact didn't recognize it. Then he gave him his actual code name, which was Raymond Garcia. But the contact didn't recognize that either, so the contact simply drove off. The Russians, believing that this clown who decided to meet in person in an embassy parking garage and tell them that he works for the FBI and tell them his actual name and tell them his code name, they thought nobody could be that fucking stupid. He must be a triple agent. And they filed an official complaint with the United States State Department. So despite having revealed his dumb face, giving the code name he'd been using for 15 years, revealing that he worked for the FBI, and perhaps tongue-kissing the GRU contact for a good half hour or so, the FBI decided not to bother investigating Russia's complaint. See, they knew that the Bobbert was squeaky clean and that he had a great track record of definitely not spying. They knew that the Bobbert had repeatedly come just so very close to catching all the moles that seemed to always leak the exact kinds of information that he always had access to. But most importantly, despite 3 solid pages of the complaint describing a very awkward and off-putting makeout session, the FBI knew that above all else, Big Bobbert Robert was a very adequate tongue kisser. In 1993, the Bobbert hacked into fellow agent Ray Mislock's computer and printed off a highly classified document. He then immediately took that document to Ray and said, "I told you the system was vulnerable." Mislock was not amused, nor was the FBI as a whole. An investigation was finally launched, but ultimately they believed the Bobberts' claim that the stunt was simply to demonstrate that the system was susceptible to attack.
I was going to say, that's probably the least suspicious thing he did. It was certainly underhanded, but hackers do that shit all the time.
Yeah, and it is one way that you're going to get reprimanded for it because, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't get fired and he didn't get in trouble, really. They said, "Knock it off now, mister."
Yeah.
After the fact, Mislock and the FBI kind of figured out that, he actually hacked the system to snoop around in the FBI files to see if he was being investigated, because obviously they would, block him from those files, but not necessarily the agent next to him. Mm-hmm. And then he used this as an excuse because he knew that it would be obvious that he hacked in. But if you come and, don't hide it and then give this stupid reason as to why, and it worked. They were okay, but don't do that again. In 1994,
he did it
the
again.
Bobbert, pretty much. 1994, the Bobbert set his sights on a position in the newly created National Counterintelligence Center, But then he found out that you have to take a lie detector test in order to transfer.
Then he heard the word counter in there. And he's like, oh, shit. See, I move intelligence.
Intelligence, yeah. He literally found out that you have to take a lie detector test. And he's like, yeah, never mind, for other reasons. But makes me wonder, like, why a lie detector test wasn't part of all the other fucking positions which granted him clearance to...
To be fair, they're bullshit.
That was my very next sentence in my note.
Okay.
But, to be fair, he should know that. Like, I mean, if you're in the FBI and working as a spy, the last thing in the world you should be afraid of is a lie detector test.
I feel like that would be the actual test, is like, we're going to have you do a lie detector test, and then, like, anybody who buys into it, you immediately say no, and you only bring in the people who are like, those aren't real. Like, those aren't valid.
So in the late mid-90s, another FBI agent who had been convicted of being a mole suggested that the FBI look into Hanssen's activities. But again, they declined to do so. So at this point, it's like the fourth or fifth credible person that's like, I think this guy's dirty. And they're like, nah. Like, he showers every day. What the fuck are you I think that was it. It's like they just didn't understand what they were saying. They're like, he's dirty. And they're like, no, he's pretty clean, usually. Like, no, he's a mole. It's like, no, that's just a pimple. It'll go away.
Corrupt? What's that? I feel like you're about to say more. What's that mean?
But about this same time, the Bobbert began using his access to the FBI's internal case search system to search for himself both by name and by address.
He's just vain at this point. What are they saying about me?
Right. He's like, how notorious am I? And then we get increasingly like bold because he's like, these fuckers don't know anything about me.
They called me Baba Bitchy. What the fuck? All these emails.
He found out immediately that they knew exactly what was going on. They just didn't care. They're like, he's Robert. Who fucking cares?
He's literally not done a thing we care about.
He's never once turned over information that a better mole hadn't already first.
He's actually our most effective weapon because Russia thinks they have somebody valuable, and we have this fucking dipshit like telling him what our fucking lunch orders are.
So when he saw that he wasn't being investigated, he resumed his spy operations, though he continued to periodically search for himself. As it turns out, the U.S. intelligence community had, for a very long time, suspected that a second mole was involved in the same leaks as the Ames guy. And since 1994, they'd had an official operation looking into it. They referred to the second mole as Gray Suit.
That fucking took a long time. What the hell?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's probably why they couldn't narrow it down, given the amount of people who worked in intelligence and at least sometimes wore a gray suit.
We got kind of pigeonholed by the file name. It really became hard to narrow it down when we started with that lead.
The new guy comes in all proud of his new tailored suit, and it just happens to be gray, and he's like, oh, how do I look, boss? And he just gets fucking tackled. Where were you in 1985? He's like, I was 4. Where were you?
I was playing ball with my dad.
Do you have proof of that? Gray suit. So part of the reason that the operation didn't pick up on the Bobberts' trail sooner was because they had long assumed that the other mole also had been with the CIA. And so their investigation went years before even considering that the leak might be within the FBI. Which is interesting to me, too, because the FBI had kind of suspected something at one point.
I'm seeing it come to go. This is when they instituted it's probably the other institution's fault.
Right. That's the thing. If they had, worked together, it could have been solved, immediately. But they're like, no, this is on you. Or if you
just, if you did your instinct and passed the buck, you would have been right this time.
Right. But the long and unwavering operation did happen to uncover some other spies. And then they ran a criminal profile in 1996. Similar to weeks and weeks ago, we talked about that serial killer in Alaska, and he was caught in part because they brought the profiler in and they could tell, oh, he, this and that.
I remember that one, and he did everything short of arresting the dude himself, and they didn't arrest him. But he did have a hell of a profile.
Yeah, he nailed him, and they were like, Well, in this case, they got a hell of a profile, but it just happened to point to a CIA agent by the name of Brian Kelly, who had been involved with the block operation, which, if you remember from the beginning of the show, had been hampered by Bobbert. So, like, they knew that, like, something fishy went on, because they knew they had the guy, then suddenly, like, all the evidence went away.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this guy was on that file, and he fits our profile.
And we're bored. So let's get him.
So after having his home searched, his phones tapped, his family followed everywhere, and then still failing to come up with anything, the FBI was just like, fuck it. And they sent in a false foreign agent to his home, like this. They just sent some random, like, they said guy with an accent to his front door. And when this Brian Kelly answered, the guy was like, hey, the FBI's onto you. They know you're a spy. Come to the metro station tomorrow. We'll get you out of here.
That's got to be confusing. Because then you're
right.
like, well, fuck, maybe I am a spy. Maybe I've been brainwashed.
Yeah. So, of course, they were sure they had the guy, and they were sure that this would freak him out, and he'd, like, show up to flee. Instead, he reported it to the FBI. Like, hey, something's going on. They think I'm a spy. Yeah, some random foreign guy came to my house and says I'm a spy. And the FBI's like, well, fuck. So they promptly took him into interrogation.
What do you know about that guy you never met?
Well, no, they're like, fuck, he didn't fall for it, but let's arrest him anyway.
Yeah.
And so they basically arrested him and took him into interrogation, and they interrogated his ex-wife, and they interrogated his kids, and they basically interrogated anybody that knew him at all. And everyone was like, what the fuck are you talking about? This guy's clean.
This guy fucking is as American as they come.
And, of course, they were doing that thing where they'd play it cool, then they'd walk out of the room and pound the table like, fuck, we can't get this guy. He's so fucking good.
Well, we got your ex-wife in there, and she is singing a song for us, man. And then, like, they leave, and it's like, fuck, she's not talking either.
Right, pretty much. And so they're like, well, we know it's him, but nobody will talk. So they couldn't arrest him, but they did put him on administrative leave.
Oh, no.
Like,
no.
I know, that's the thing, is it's like... Imagine how fucking confused this guy is, though. He's like, what the fuck? And they're like, we know you did it, but we can't arrest you.
The most dangerous man in America, and he's just watching Sports Center waiting to get a call to go back to work.
Well, and that's hilarious to me, too, because they're like, we can't arrest you, but we know you're dirty, and we'll fucking get you. But until then, go home, don't come to work, and we'll continue paying you. And it's like...
and we'll be in touch.
You're like, oh, okay, darn it. Hope you don't catch me.
Yeah.
Although I imagine that it had to be pretty fucking stressful because you work at this place and you know how fucking inept they are. So you know at any moment they could come just like...
I was going to say, like, they have the fucking total cop certainty of, like, based off no evidence. But they're doing that cliche, like, my gut tells me he's up to something. Because if we have to start from scratch, that sucks. So it's like, yeah, you're kind of probably in this really, like, psychologically numb spot of, like, these idiots are actually going to kill me at some point because they think I'm the spy.
Or at the very least, throw me in jail, like, in a dark cell where I'll never be heard from again. Like, you might as well be dead at that point. And so this was in, like, 97, I think I said. 96, 97, maybe 98, but I think 97. He'd remain on administrative leave until the Bobbert was finally caught in 2001. So for like 4 years, they were 100% sure. Pretty much. His sloppy spying continued to aid the FBI and the CIA in zeroing in on him. My notes, at this point, I knew I was getting too long to really go into the details. There was like he had hacked or used somebody else's... PDA, you know, like tablet, what they used to call it in the olden times, that kind of stuff. Like, he was just, by this point, you've been doing it for 25 years. He's probably fucking close to retiring, and you think, I can't get caught. These people are idiots. Yeah. So you get sloppy. By the end, like, it was pretty apparent that he realized that they had finally figured it out. Just like weeks before he got arrested, he had asked a friend that he knew that worked in private tech, like an IT company or something, for a job. He'd sent a letter to his Russian contacts saying that he thought that the U.S. was onto him and that complaining that he had been promoted to a do-nothing job and given no access to classified information. So, like, even when they have their guy, they're not the sneakiest at, like, catching him. But this guy didn't bother trying to run. He's just like, I think they know who I am, but I don't know. Maybe if I quit before they arrest me.
That might be more effective. Like, if things are going too well, or you're, like, way too over the top about it, like, I kind of like the idea of professionally putting this guy in purgatory.
Yeah, that's true. Be like, we got this great new opportunity for you in the mailroom.
Yeah, you're going to like this. You sit and stamp forms that you're not allowed to read.
You sort and wash the jockstraps. And he's like, what fucking Josh? This is the FBI. And you're like, yep.
And
we brought some in
and you try on gray suits. Well,
that was the other thing. Maybe their whole investigation process was basically Cinderella, where they went agent to agent. They're like, try on this gray suit. Fuck, it doesn't fit.
That's the thing, like, he wore gray suits, but he had, like, really short arms or something, so it looked like it never fit him right.
Yeah. They're like, it can't be him. He even complained to the FBI that he thought his car had been bugged because his radio was making weird noises. But the FBI, the note said that they were unable to replicate what he said he was hearing, but it's like, at the same time,
why sound? And they're like,
why would they replicate it? Like, and it's weird that you would complain to the FBI that you think that the FBI bugs your car, because it's like, hey, look, I think you guys know I'm a spy, but I'm not sure. And I think you bugged my car, but I'm not sure. Did you? And they're like, no. And he's like, okay, well, then forget what I said about being a spy. Like, I don't know. It seems like all of this by the end, like, everybody just knew and they just kind of accepted it. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's why I have to believe, like, they were probably getting something out of him being a spy.
Probably, because anything that we do know about this story was we were allowed to know by this all coming out, so you're probably right. Like, there
was probably some shit there.
Yeah.
Like, somebody was whoever he delivered info to probably delivered info back to us.
Well, that's what's funny is, like, through this whole story, like, you always hear about spies and you know it's a thing, but it's like I think that there's more people working between the U.S. and Russia, like the two, if you combine them. I think they've got more spies than, like, Starbucks has employees. Mm-hmm. Like, I really think literally every person in the FBI or the KGB is spying for one of the two countries. Well, like, some are triple agents. You get to, like, you don't get to retire until you're, like, a quadruple agent.
Well, that's
like,
what's so interesting to me, because, like, you think about, since the Cold War, you know, you got United States versus Russia, and each side on a public level is, like, you know, it's tense and scary, and there's all this conflict. But then you think about it, there's probably just this fucking sorority of spies and fucking information brokers and shit who are constantly, they're just playing a market. If you think about it, like, information is just a good to them. So where do they, you know, profit the most?
So now I'm picturing, like, a writer's room for, like, journalists where they're all, like, when you're in the field, you're all, like, cutthroat and, like, you're all competitors because you want to break the story first. But then you, like, go to the same bars and you're just, like, kicking it together. Like,
yeah, totally. That's why there was no hard feelings when fucking Ames or whatever his name was took the hit. He was like, shit.
And the best part, Ames was executed by the U.S. for being a spy. And even then, it's just like, good show.
Yeah.
You got me. But, like, despite, like, all these signs for Bobbert telling him that, like, hey, they probably have figured this out, he agreed to make one last dead drop. And if you don't know spy stuff, dead drop, that's that movie-esque thing where you, like, agree to leave information, like, behind the third tree next to the burnt-out light in, like, Milford Park or whatever.
That says Bobbert's World.
Definitely not spy materials. Real big on the bag that you leave. So he agreed to this dead drop, but of course this last one was the FBI setting him up for the final nail in the Big Bobbert coffin. which at this point was nail like number 783.
It's a big coffin for a lot of bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately for both the FBI and the CIA, a lot of these nails in his coffin actually went into other people's coffins because...
Yeah.
They had a coffin nail gun and were just spraying it places. Like, maybe it'll...
Covering your eyes while you fucking blow a nail gun.
So to avoid the death penalty, the Bobbert confessed to like 14 counts of espionage and 1 count of attempted espionage, which was hilarious to me because that means they got him on these 14 other things, and then on the attempted dead drop, they bothered to go ahead and charge him with attempting to spy, even though that was a fake thing.
Fucking up spying.
Like, that just shows... Like, it's weird to me that you bother tacking that on.
I think
because
it should
at this
be
point,
twice as fucking strict as the actual spying. Because if you're incompetent about it, you have no business spying.
Right. Like, look, if this had been a real spy deal, you would embarrass the fuck out of the United States with your incompetence.
Well, that's another thing that makes me think, like, it was probably, like, a silently, like, he probably didn't even know it, but it was probably a beneficial thing for him to do what he did. But once he's sloppy about it, it exposes the whole thing. You're fucking up our arrangement, dude. Like,
yeah. And that, you know what's funny is I didn't think of that, but I should, because we've talked about that. We have not talked about spies before, I don't think, but we've done a lot of gangsters or mobsters, or, you know, those kind of criminals. And both of these organizations have a long fucking documented history of working with those people as they were, like, murdering other people, but being like, we don't care as long as we get something out of it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's very plausible that was what's going on here, but I hadn't thought about that. Stupid me, I'm buying into this false narrative.
This guy was some master spy.
Oh, no, I did not buy into that. It was very apparent from the get-go. So, he pled guilty, so instead of getting the death penalty, he's only serving 15 life sentences without the possibility of parole in a federal supermax prison. So
I feel like you take the death penalty, you'll be on death row long enough that, like, you're fine. I
was just about to say that, because I don't want to die, and I think I would be terrified, like, as you're sitting on the chair or whatever. But at the same time, I don't want to fucking sit in a cell for, like, 40 years. I don't think he was...
I honestly think that, like, when you make that choice, like, I'm going to be a fucking spy, I'm going to be a double agent, anything less than getting, like, just obliterated by assault rifles is, like, you failed. Like,
right.
You should, like, it shouldn't have ever gone to a trial.
Well, you at least have to have that badass thing about the, like, cyanide-filled,
like everybody
tooth cap.
Yeah, well, that sounds horrible. I've heard so many stories about, like, people trying to do that, and it just fucks them up.
Not working.
Yeah. But you should totally pull that, like, you fuckers got a light, and then, like, you just get blown to shit. Like,
right.
You could have at least made a movie out of your life. And now you fucked it up for all of us. Now you're just a shitty topic for our podcast.
That's right.
Congratulations, Baba Boop.
I hope he, like, the one luxury he gets in his prison is he listens to our show, and then this episode comes across, and he's like, "You assholes, I was a good spy. A good spy."
Apparently not. You got caught.
We're right.
Yeah.
They haven't caught me yet. I mean, I'm not a spy.
That would be awesome if you actually turned out to be a spy, and that's what got you. I would love it if this show exposed your ass. Hi, I'm Dan Matlock, FBI.
I've been on your trail for 10 fucking years. I've had to sit through this goddamn podcast for 10 damn years.
About video games for 5 years like a fucking child.
Waiting for you to slip up, and you finally did, asshole. Ha ha ha. Got a light?
Yeah.
So I just have, like, one final note is I can't help but, like, wonder about his family, though. Like, you know, the government seized all of his money, saying it was all, like, the ill-gotten gains from spying. And they did cut off his pension. That was part of his sentencing. But, like, his wife and kids may or may not have had any idea what was even, like, going on.
But that's your, that's your legal money. Like, they can turn that off. They can't. Like, if he did his fucking illegal shit right, there was, a storage unit with a mountain of money. And by mountain, I mean, like, 2 fucking stacks. Because he undersold his services. $100,000. What are you doing? But, like, yeah, it's like, I'm just imagining, like, a shitman's Breaking Bad finale.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but I'm picturing, like, the wife from Goodfellas.
Karen Hill.
What's his face? Whatever. I always say it's one of my favorite movies, but I've only seen it once, so I don't know her name.
It's Karen Hill.
Karen Hill, okay. But yeah, like, she obviously knew what was going on. And, like, on the one hand, I think, like, maybe this guy's wife didn't, but on the other, part of the evidence against him was the sister-in-law finding a mountain of fucking cash, like, in their bedroom. So you'd think she'd at the very least have been curious, like, hey, honey, where'd this cash come from?
Who are all these? How do people live where they're like sisters and fucking in-laws and shit can just like snoop around?
Well, yeah, that's what I said at the time. Unless she was like
I would not host one fucking. You'll actually know I'm up to something because I wouldn't let anybody come over for as long as I was being illegal.
And I'm the kind of person that if I have something that's 100% legal, but I'm still like, don't want somebody to see, I get like super obvious about it. Like they start to go into the room. It's like, oh, you can't go in there. There's a
$100 million
killer
in cash.
In there. Yeah, I mean, not that. It's something else, but definitely not that, but you can't see it. So like, yeah, like to just like have that and then casually let people walk around it. Yeah. This is what I mean. Like she probably knew, but like maybe he was lying to her. But on the other hand, I like started imagining like if I was coming into all this like illegal spy cash and like tried to lie to my wife about it, like, and you say like, oh, we just got like this great bonus at work. It's awesome. I know my wife, God bless her.
She knows you're not getting a bonus. She knows to be fair, she knows where you work.
She's pretty trusting. She'd probably believe it, but the first fucking FBI like banquet that we had, she'd open her damn mouth and like to the first like other FBI wife that she sees and be like, oh, so what did your husband do with all his $100,000 bonus cash? Yeah. And the wife would be like, what? And then she'd be like, yeah, didn't you think it was weird that they paid it in rubles?
That he duct taped the money to your child to smuggle through an airport?
So like, even if my wife, like, that's why I wouldn't lie to her about where it came from, because that's like the least secure way to keep the lie, because then she'd blab about it to everybody. And I don't know.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Where would I hide illegal money? That's a good question.
That's what's so weird.
I probably wouldn't hide it because, as we established, I apparently have like a criminal death wish. But
you at least use it like you don't just keep stacks of like bills that you got illegally laying around. You immediately like buy the sports cars or that kind of stuff, because that at least leaves a trail of people guess like, how do you get that money? But the original like illegal thing is gone, so it like creates that separation. Yeah. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. Like I said, that the whole thing about this that really caught my attention was that there was a good like 3-year period where he was specifically put in charge of the operation to catch this mole, which was him. Yeah. And they didn't like think to vet him first. Yeah. Like it could be anybody, absolutely anybody, except you.
Did you ever, I know you're not a big anime guy, but there's a show called Death Note. And
I've heard of it. I'm aware of
and
what it is.
And it's a pretty great show. Or at least it was. I haven't seen it since I was in high school, but I don't know how it holds up. But there's a similar thing in that where the main character is the fucking guilty party, and he gets put in prominent positions to investigate himself. And with him on these task forces is like the smartest detective ever. Like fucking
like Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, but like more psychotically smart, like a superpower smart. And he even suspects from the get-go that like this guy's totally him, but he never does anything about it. He just sort of keeps going along. Like,
yeah. So maybe that's where Bobbert got his modus operandi, is he was a big fan of Death Note, and he's like, hey, this actually works in real life.
But there's also a similar thing in that where it's like if that dude just like didn't like overstep, which I guess is like, you know, kind of the point of any show or movie like that, where it's like criminal power corrupts and makes you think you're invincible. But, you know, even he's like, you know, it's like if you just didn't do that thing you did in episode 2, like this show wouldn't have ever happened and you would have been fine.
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, I have to watch Death Note now, but
don't watch the movies. Watch the movie. It's fucking awful.
And I thought there was some video games or something that people didn't like, or maybe I've heard mixed things. Like, I know that there was a lot of fans, and I thought maybe, like, over time it kind of went downhill.
I will say it's like, it's a split series, so there's like 2 main parts to it, and people didn't like the second part too much, because it kind of wraps up like the central conflict in the first half, and then the second half feels like kind of a long epilogue to get to the ending, which is actually amazing. I think it's one of the best finales I've seen in a show, but it takes a long time to get there.
But
the
I have a
concept's
hard time
pretty cool.
I have a hard time accepting that complaint from a fan base that by and large loves Dragon Ball Z, which would spend entire fucking episodes multiple times in a row with just like a single monologue. Right.
Yeah.
But no, it sounds like it kind of, I guess it's a little different.
There is a scene where the main character is eating chips. That is the most dramatic scene ever fucking put together. The way he narrates eating chips and the way they cut it is a work of art. It's a masterpiece.
Okay, if never
watched the show, just look up the chip eating scene, and that's really the highlight. It's actually better if you don't have the context for why he's eating chips like a god. Anyway,
so this is the Death Note podcast. Yeah. Now, I'm going to continue to just believe that the FBI and CIA are both completely inept.
Yeah.
But your theory is very likely as well. But
they can both
saying
be
it
true.
Can't be exactly. They're so
because
anyway,
I would argue like you had a lot of probably good people who died because of this dipshit. There was probably a way to get what you want without like letting a fucking mole roam around.
And it's that thing where, like, part of me for a split second is like, well, they were spies too. How good were they? And it's like, well, they could have been very good.
Yeah.
But regardless of if they were good or bad, like, death is death. Like, you don't... you know, that's what, like, I started with. Like, you're giving away state secrets. Like, at one point he was giving away, he had access to, like, what kind of satellite operations we were running, what kind of... Oh, I skipped over this in my notes. And I'm going to go back to it, even though it's irrelevant now. One of the things that he gave away, and he was actually paid like $55,000 for this one piece of information specifically. And he gave this away in the 80s or 90s.
It was a Super Bowl
pick. It was the fact that in 1977, Russia built a new an embassy here in America. When they did that, the FBI spent millions upon millions of dollars to dig a secret tunnel under the fucking thing that they were going to use to eavesdrop on them.
God.
And then they fucking chickened out. They never used it.
Yeah, fucking pansies. But I mean, it's also that like Wile E. Coyote shit.
Yeah.
Like, there's never any sophistication to like. That's why I'm saying like they could have been in on it and fucking inept because their fucking plans are just like, you know, instead like it wasn't like, oh, we tracked him to a parking lot. It was we followed him to a parking lot. And
well, I like to think
we were
that
just
they, like,
in a slightly darker corner of that same parking lot.
I like to think that they spent millions of dollars building this tunnel, and the reason they didn't use it is they built it, they finished it, and then the general in charge of the operation, whatever the fuck you call the different ranks in the FBI, was like looking at the guy who it was the head of the lead on the team project. He's like, okay, we got our tunnel. What's the next step? And the guy's like, well, now we bring in the information to listen to the intercepted satellite transmissions. And the general's like, The what? And he's like, the intercepted satellite transmissions. He's like, can't we listen to those from like our office back up top?
And the guy's like, well, yeah, but to some interceptions in the Super Bowl.
It's like, he's like, well, how do we eavesdrop from down here? And it's like, well, via radio cable. It's like, well, we can do that from anywhere. And the guy's like, well, yeah, but we have a tunnel. And it's like, God damn it. I knew I should have read through this whole plan before we started digging the fucking tunnel. Yeah. But anyway, so that was the kind of stuff he was giving up. And that stuff's all fine with me, especially the tunnel thing, because that was fucking stupid.
Yeah.
If you're that dumb to dig the tunnel, he deserves to make some money off of telling him about the tunnel.
I mean, if you're Russia, all you do with that information, this is probably why it's worth $55,000. You just connect your sewer pipe to that tunnel.
We've been doing this show for way too fucking long, because that's exactly what my thought was too. Like, you divert.
Yeah, I mean, like, you don't interrupt it. When your enemy's making mistakes, let them.
Yeah, the top brass. Are we getting any information? Or like, we're getting something, but it stinks. Or like, you mean it's not? You think it's fishy? It's like, no, it literally stinks. They're shitting on us.
I need to drop a courtesy secret.
So that stuff, giving that stuff up, it's like, yeah, whatever. I have a little bit dimmer view on giving up agents that could very well and often did lead to them being executed. Yeah, that's not cool.
But it's not worth a lot of money either.
Well, it probably, like, they revoked his access to that informant's room that we were talking about, the bar or whatever, where they're sitting around and...
Yeah, our informants keep getting busted. Like, yeah. You'd probably move those deck chairs too.
But that's my story for this week. I thought it was an interesting departure from what I normally do. And I just really was an excuse for me. It was really an excuse for me to call the guy Bobbert, like, for an hour. Yeah. Like, it wasn't even funny the first time, but I was like, it'll really not be funny by the hour mark. Yeah. So
we need to take all the fun out of that sequence of sounds. And I think we did that today.
Bobbert. So, anyway.
Bobbert,
that's
it. Anyway, thanks for listening to the show this week. We'll be back next week with a new story about a different person in a different time in a different place.
Maybe.
Or the guy right next to him literally his entire life. That's what's great about this show. You don't know.
Well, I was just thinking we haven't tried doing the exact same topic 2 weeks in a row yet.
No. We'll get there. We're running out of Wikipedia as we speak. So, we'll see you all next week. Thanks.
Later.